and welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and today we're talking with Julian Terry, the director and DP of the horror short Don't Peek, which he shot nearly alone in his bedroom during the pandemonium, the old Panda Sanctuary, the old Panera Bread. The film, the little short, has been optioned now, so it's going to be turned into a feature, as well as like two other films of his. So it was excellent to talk to Julian, if for nothing else than inspiration. But also, one thing that I really liked that we kind of dug into was the importance of having a good story. And as fun as gear is, having that gear serve the story, storytelling is not necessarily a popular topic on the old internets, but needs to be. The gear is more accessible, I suppose. Storytelling is far more cerebral. But so we talk about that a little bit. Obviously, the gear stuff, his career. It's a great talk. I love this one. So, as always, short intro. Let's get to my discussion with Julian. Tell me how you got started in cinematography. Were you always a film nut, or how did you come to the art?
Well, it's funny. I always wanted to direct. That was my big thing, and it got to a weird point where, when I was a kid, I would stay home sick and I'd try to recreate shots. Like, I remember when I would try to recreate shots from Seven just with photos and such, and try to recreate the lighting. And, that was something that was really fun. And I loved taking pictures of everything. I had a Nikon FG that I carried with me everywhere. And I just took black and white photos of Chicago all the time. I was always around Rogers Park or Lincoln Park. I really loved just taking photos of architecture, just people's faces. And I got really into street photography throughout high school. But the thing that really got me in was, I really was kind of dancing around filming. I'd shoot like some of my friends' projects. I never had a video camera growing up. I would help out. And it was basically, once I kind of fled Chicago and came out here after I flunked out of film school.
And you're in LA?
And I'm in LA now. Yeah, I'm in North Hollywood. And I basically was shooting a no-budget music video, and it was with some college students. Like, we were just trying to figure out what we were doing. But I realized really quickly I didn't know how to speak the language. I didn't know how to talk to a DP. I knew how to speak to actors. I worked well with direction there, but when it came down to I knew about the line, I knew about certain elements, I knew certain images that were pretty, but I didn't understand how to speak focal lengths and how to speak to a gaffer. And I was like, okay, I want to learn this stuff because I don't want to be this director that can't speak to a DP. So I went ahead, and this was my first month out here in LA when I was literally crashing on someone's couch, a stranger's couch. And, I was barely making it by, but I was like, this is what I need to do. I have to learn this. And I basically spent the whole year really just working my way up from, I was an office PA at one point, but I also worked my way up to being I was like a camera PA for a bit, I was a second AC, working up to the first AC. Since I was a wrestler at one point, everyone knew that I could just lift stuff. So they're like, you can be a grip, and I was like, great. And I'd grip a lot. I was learning. I would always watch what everybody was doing though. And I would just, the best way to get to know a DP, at least back then, was before the vaping was the big thing, but I would just carry a pack of cigarettes. And I never smoked cigarettes, but I would just carry a pack of them. And the DP or director would just go ahead and, have me come over for a minute. And there were some times where I would literally, for some of these music videos, this one DP really dug me because I always carried cigarettes. And he was like, hey, let me get a few, you go ahead and operate the camera for this one. I'm like, oh, cool. And you kind of find your way into talking with people, or you just are willing to jump aboard with anything. And I would just watch how the tricks were done. You know, there's a lot of lighting tricks on lighting the face. And yeah, basically I worked and worked, and I eventually was there was an office PA job I was doing where I got hit up to do I got hit up to do this job, but I remember I went on an elevator ride down. When I found out I didn't even got to keep the job, I literally was fired off this thing. It was a really bad day as an office PA. And I botched a lunch order. And I'm on the way down, and I get into an elevator with this exec who does shows for Discovery Channel. And we're chatting. He's like, so how do you like your day as an office PA? And I'm like, well, not so great. I think I'm not going to be here too much longer. I'm really better with the camera. He's like, oh, really? Well, we could use somebody here who knows how to use this thing. And I'm like, that'd be great. And I gave him my email. Never heard from him for over a month. And I'm literally about to move out of this apartment. And I get hit up about this job. And I'm like, I'll take it. And it was literally shooting this awful show called Fat and Furious Rolling Thunder season 2. It was ridiculous, extremely dangerous. I don't think that show would be going on at all, you know, with the conditions that we were in. But you learn really quickly how to set up the cameras and lights and move quickly with these very heavy cameras. And, you know, that really helped me out in terms of moving fast. And then after that was over, I ended up, you know, during that time, you're working really quickly, though. I'm really thankful that I had that job, because you learn how to rock. They say like you're rocking a guitar, you know, you have one finger on the focus, you know, one on your aperture, and, you know, you constantly just kind of like going like this the whole time, and being able to punch in for your zooms and keep your focus at the same time and make sure you're rocking your aperture when you go outside.
Because this is all unscripted.
Yeah, yes, it was just crazy nonsense. Like, you know, throwing carrying a phantom camera in front of a bunch of cars and recording really quickly and running out of the way. You know, like it was ridiculously dangerous. But, you know, you learn how to move quickly. But then after that, I came back to LA and started shooting music videos again. I worked up to I was like kind of a gaffer, and occasionally I would DP smaller stuff. And I ended up getting a job at BuzzFeed as an intern, and I worked my way up there, and I ended up working my way up to being the only branded cinematographer on staff. So all their commercials, I ended up kind of saving their butts with a shoot, because I was able to work really, really quickly and light with what we had, and basically pull off a commercial looking shot with what they had in the film cage. And it really saved them on this one shoot, and basically got me the job to stay there. And, you know, knowing how to go ahead and problem solve is probably the best thing you can have as a DP. Like the best, you know, knowledge is just, okay, how can we light this with what we have? With a few mirrors and mirror boards, can we figure this out? And, you know, work my way up as a DP for the brand side really helped me out in terms of working with a bigger crew and bigger budgets. You know, we went from like the BuzzFeed smaller stuff was $300, you know, then you had like 25 grand for a budget, then you had like 250 grand for a budget. And you work with a bigger crew, and you learn how to handle different scenarios. You know, sometimes you're literally the only person with the camera and you're filming sharks, people in the water with sharks, or you'll be with like filming puppies and kittens, and you have to find the best lighting for this, or film babies. You know, it really did help me out in terms of handling any scenario outside of, you know, BuzzFeed afterwards. It was really fantastic. I guess that's kind of a rundown, but yeah, that was really how I got into cinematography, was really just kind of throwing myself in there and filming. Like, I think I shot close to 200 videos for BuzzFeed in the span of a few months or something crazy. I mean, I think
they've got high output.
I think it was 100. Yeah, it was crazy. I was beyond exhausted, but I really think that when you just constantly shoot and shoot and shoot, it becomes second nature, and you try to experiment a little bit with your lighting and how you have like, you know, maybe I could. You watch a movie and you're like, I see what they're doing here. Can I replicate this? Oh, what's this checkerboard thing? Maybe I could try that out. Or you end up finding a focal length that you love, and then you start experimenting with that focal length and changing it up. And I think it's really fun to just work with the directors and see how they worked, not only with actors, but how they brought their visions to life. And I think my job was always to bring that vision to life. I wanted to always make sure that director left happy, no matter what their crazy ideas were. I was like, how can we achieve something close to that, though? It was never something in it for me or my reel or anything. It was always, how do I make this director happy? And, maybe it was throwing in ideas to kind of help it out, help find what that groove could be, or make it even better than what they imagined. And I always loved that. That was always my favorite thing to pull off.
Totally.
You had mentioned that's my long answer there.
Oh no, that's hey man, it's our long podcast. You take as much time as you need. You had mentioned like a few like lighting techniques that you had learned. Do you remember any of those off the top of your head that you still use to this day?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's funny to look at some of these techniques, how you kind of live and breathe by them. Like I always loved the book light, like putting up a book light and finding like the right just the right softness on the face. I think that was what I love to do, is find like, oh, how can I get a fun roll off here? I love experimenting with that. I think the funny thing is when I switched to directing, was I kind of threw a lot of this stuff out the window in terms of my own DP style. It became almost, how close can I replicate a practical element? And I love that as a DP. I would always try to find, okay, how can I make this stage feel more like we're not on a sound stage? Can we make the highlights bloom a bit? Can we really punch out our fake sun that's outside? I think that's the fun part, is trying to give it a little bit of something organic, make it feel a little bit rougher. I love that feeling. And, when it comes down to even shooting these little fun shorts, it was all like, how can we go ahead and give it that realistic feeling? How can we make it feel like they're in bed at this time? One thing for Don't Peek, for example, I had a little hair light going on the ceiling. This is actually my bedroom where I shot it. And I think what's funny about it is, for me, for horror films, I think overlit stuff, it doesn't freak me out as much. I feel safe when I see, oh, I can tell there's a little hair light here. I feel safe. I know I'm on a set. But as soon as it feels like, oh, the only thing lighting here is a lamp, that's way creepier to me. It kind of feels unpredictable. And I think that's what gets in people's heads. And for Don't Peek, for example, like I had the opening where things are very lit nicely, and she's lit by the switch, and like her hair light's going on from the ceiling here, and it feels very cinematic. But then as soon as things kind of take a turn for the worse and we know it's scary, I turn the lamp back on, but I don't turn the hair light back on. And that's what makes it creepier. I think everyone gets like chills by the end, because they're like, oh shoot, this is a horror movie. I'm scared. Just because those little subtle things that nobody really pays attention to, like hair light, I don't think the average film goer knows what that is, but they see kind of beauty in that. They see, oh, there's something soft here. They feel like this is very cinematic. But once it's taken away, it feels like, oh my God, we're capturing just a moment in someone's bedroom. And I feel like find that authenticity is the most important thing.
Sure. You had mentioned earlier that you were always matching like things from Seven, which I'll get to in a second. Yeah. But were there what were your influences growing up? Like your visual influences? Was it a lot of Fincher?
I mean, obviously, Fincher is just such a master with the camera. I think, one thing I find myself, I was always trying to replicate, I think, Spielberg a lot. And I loved, I don't know, I've kind of fell in love with the way he would do his push-ins, or even just kind of locked off shots where you can just kind of capture as much as you can in the frame. So a lot of Fincher was kind of there from the get-go. Like I liked Hitchcock as well. There was something fantastic, but Fincher had such a way with lighting that I was like, wow, that's really cool. It's really like every frame just felt impactful to me. Same thing with I think it was Raging Bull in high school. I was like, wow, this is super cool. And I remember even when I watched I think I started watching Kurosawa films in like senior year of high school or something like that. And we shot like a samurai film back then, and it was so much fun. But I started watching so much Kurosawa because I was like, wow, this is so cool. I don't know what it is here, but something's different about this filmmaking. And I realized later on, I was like, oh, this guy is literally just letting the actors do the movement. There's of course famous shots that he does add movement to, but a lot of the times he just did really good blocking. Same thing with Spielberg, though. You look at Sugarland Express, it's like it's like film school blocking. It's fantastic. It's a great film school, like where you can just watch and you're like, oh, I see what's going on here. And then you see some of those elements almost in Munich, where you see, oh, this camera's kind of just flowing with them. It almost feels like it's a character trying to keep up with the talent, and it works really well. And I think that really did help me in terms of my style now. My style now is kind of interesting. It's kind of become a mixture of, I love the precision of Fincher, and I love how Spielberg does his push-ins and finds the emotion in things, and finds those kind of emotional aspects. But the thing that really kind of hooks me a bit is something that came from playing a lot of video games as a kid, playing like first-person shooters. That was always most scary to me. It was, you can't see, you can't turn around, you're just stuck with this perspective. And I really fell in love with doing a lot of perspective shots. I think they really do sell a story. They really make it just plop the audience right there in the talent's shoes. And it's really fantastic to be there. I think that's the most fun in the world, is to go and say, okay, can you go ahead and find elements in your visual style from like a video game, or even looking at like what works in something else, a different medium. I think that's the most fun.
Totally. Were you a big like special features guy? I know I went to film school, but like half of the shit I learned even before I got there was just from watching commentaries and special features. Like that's what got me into filmmaking was the behind the scenes stuff on my favorite DVDs.
Oh yeah, no, I think I literally have the most insane Blu-ray wall just because of the commentaries and special features. I think what's great about them is, I always loved when a certain filmmaker was coming out with a new movie, because I knew, oh, they put so much work into their special features. It's great, Robert Rodriguez is very famous for that. You have even Fincher has some great breakdowns for like Panic Room. He had a whole like disc just on pre-production for it, and it's like, wow,
if you can get Panic Room on Blu-ray.
Oh, well,
for some reason it's the one movie you can't get. No, like I think either they just put it out, or it hasn't come out, but like I don't have it on D. It's the one movie of his that I can't get a hold of without like spending a bunch of money.
I just have that one on DVD, and it's just, I have the like 3-disc edition of it. It was always finding the most editions of it. I think that's the most fun, looking at like my Lord of the Rings box set. That thing has like 26 hours behind the scenes, and it's like, oh my gosh, like this is a journey. But I love, there's something beautiful about that, where it's the closest you can get to having a conversation with the filmmaker. That's why I love Criterion films, where you really do a deep dive into everything that filmmaker has. Like Do the Right Thing has a great breakdown with the reading, so the script readings, and it's like, wow, this is so cool. It feels like it's the closest thing you get to being there. I think Sidney Lumet did a great job with like his book Making Movies, where you're like, oh, you get to feel what it's like to be in the room during these times. And I think that's the most important thing, because no one tells you what it's like to be actually in there. I only went through my intro film class, but as far as I know, I don't think anybody teaches you about realistically pitching to a studio. It's a whole different world. And the best thing you can do is read books or watch movies and hear what these directors have to say. I think it's really fantastic to hear about some of the predicaments they run into, and you're like, oh, I never thought I'd run into this problem. And then you find yourself running into those problems later on, and you're like, oh, thank God I listened to this commentary. I'm so thankful I did this. And yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just you can find the most fun information from that. And now the big one is the podcasts. You know, like DGA has a good podcast. There's a bunch of good ones from A24. I love listening to these podcasts where they can just, it's a huge just breakdown with the directors that you admire. You know, it's fantastic.
Yeah, the I think that that's something that we've kind of lost in the what did Steve Holfish call it? The churnalism websites that like literally wait for someone else to do the research and then just hack it up to 10 bullet points and then post it. Because even if, you know, they were to watch, for instance, actually, I think it's One Perfect Shot does, which a colleague of mine was like, they should call it many perfect shots. They don't just post one. There's like a million. A few perfect shots, but they'll do like things we learned. Maybe it was film school. I don't fucking know. They're all the same. But it was like things we learned from X commentary, and then they just bullet point the interesting stuff. But what I found is that 9 times out of 10, those bullet points are fine. You know, it's all information, but what you don't get. The stuff that you could use as a filmmaker generally is in the time between those bullet points where they're like riffing about some little problem they ran into that isn't clickbaitable or whatever. You know, it's not Robert Downey left piss on the set. It's like, oh, you know, actually I was just watching the Looper commentary and they were talking about how Emily Blunt she had to do the axe into the stump scene like pretty early on or something like that, and then they later go back to the part where she's got Joseph Gordon-Levitt in front of the shotgun, but her shoulder was all jacked up, so they've actually got a like a PA or someone holding the barrel of the shotgun off camera so she doesn't have to actually hold it because she just couldn't use it. Her rotator cuff was shot. And it's like little, you know, that's a bad example for like technical help, but it's just little things like that that like are fun.
Yeah, I think that's what's great is there's fun bits where you're like, oh wow, that's something really clever. I think even when it comes to technical, I think it was that on Gone Girl when Fincher spoke about, I think, his love for why he doesn't go with master primes anymore. He went for Leica because he was like, oh, you know, it's these characteristics that he's like, this is going to be my technical piece right here, and he starts going off about why he switched lenses, and I'm like, oh, that's really fascinating. Like, I'm glad that we can hear those nerdy talks, because a lot of times these filmmakers, they talk about stuff and it's like, okay, yeah, you do know more than this though. I want to hear the juicy nerdy stuff, like the reason why you chose this film stock or this camera, like why did you go for this over that. And I think there's really fantastic breakdowns with some of these directors where they're like, oh, I love when you get nerdy with it, you know?
That is an interesting thing that I feel like is more recent. I don't know if it's our generation or what, especially the younger kids. Like, you know, it's like a sliding scale, but like believing that there's always something deeper, that like if only we had that information, because I'm with you 100%. Like I live for that stuff, you know. I've got reams and reams of notes of just like, you know, exactly like you said, like Leica over Master Prime because XYZ. And I think people can get too locked into those sort of stats and then completely get rid of the why. Like they're so focused on the how that the why, you know, you know, it's easy to go like Fincher prefers Leica, the Summoluxes, so those are the best. You know, you always see, I got an email today and I hate this fucking question. So I'm sorry if this guy's listening, but I told him I hate the question in the email in my response. He goes, is the C500 Mark II still good in 2021?
What?
And I was like, there's something about this idea of what is best and not why. Like, what are you doing? What are you shooting? What do you need it? Also, that camera came out a year ago. It's not, it's not an XL2. It's go for it.
You know, I have to, I would love to actually talk about this because I think the problem is we are very much a gear focused culture here. And I think it is very much I don't know. It's definitely like this broy gear culture world. Like those were the things that did the best on No Film School. I'm sure that's why it's always like, well, this is the film. Like when
well, it can apply to anyone.
Like, look at this thing, yeah. And it's like, I don't know. I get so tired of, oh, what camera did you shoot on? Right after your short's done, you're like, you know, I was in a weird way, I felt very freed by having such a ridiculous constraint with the most recent short, because, you know, before it was always, oh yeah, what camera should I shoot with? Oh, okay, maybe this or that. With this one, it was literally shot in my bedroom with my girlfriend and my roommate, and it was literally just what we had, and that was, I was like, oh, I'll shoot this thing with an iPhone. I don't care. I wanted to do this constraint of just not leaving my apartment, and thankfully, my roommate had bought a Blackmagic 4K for tax reasons, but you know, it was just this Blackmagic Pocket 4K with a little Sigma art zoom, and he had the Tokina 11-16, those two lenses and a camera. And I'm like, okay, I've never shot with these lenses, I've never shot with this camera. It shoots B-raw, whatever that is, I'll figure it out, and you know, we'll figure it as we go, it doesn't matter. And putting the gear aside was so great, because it just made me focus on the story. I'm like, I could care less on what the shoot's on, because I look at that footage, and a lot of my friends, everyone I spoke to at South by, they all thought that it was shot with something like an Alexa or a Red, but they didn't understand, like, oh, you shot that on a Blackmagic Pocket. And I was like, yeah, it's like a $1,300 camera, you know, and the compression from YouTube's gonna just butcher it no matter what. You know,
dump a bunch of contrast into it.
Yeah, so it's like there's something to just like, hey, you know what? It's fine. It's like, obviously for the feature, it's you know, you have to make sure it's you know, able to perform on a big screen, whatever. You know, that's whatever. But when you're just shooting something, don't let the tools and the gear get in your head beforehand, because it doesn't even matter in a way. You know, it's like, okay, yeah, you obviously need your lenses for what you need to cover, but you know, a lot of times I find a sensor is just a sensor. You know, some of my best looking stuff came from a C300, the first one, you know, and, you know, I look at like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and I'm like, that thing was shot in a Red 1, you know, and for
Social
most
Network was too.
An Epic. Yeah. And it's like, I think that was before the MX.
They switched halfway
blown away
through.
by these.
I know that.
They switched halfway through. Yeah. And then they had the Epic, I think, some point in Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but these cameras are all right. You know, you could get them for cheap now.
The Red 1 objectively is like tough to use.
Yeah.
Like no one would want that today.
The whole menu system's awful. Yeah. I mean, there was some
sensitivity's rough on it too.
I dropped about it. Yeah. Yeah, definitely have to have a lot of light. But I was sitting there like, you know, that film looks incredible still today. You know, I don't think anybody should go ahead and say, oh, well, it's just about how to use it. Yeah, you need a lot more light to make it work. But,
Zodiac was shot on the Thompson Viper. Who's going to buy a Thompson Viper?
No, that thing is insane too. I mean, it's basically just a big old computer. I think of things like, like I look at that little Blackmagic Pocket and I'm like, wow, this thing, it does a great job. I was blown away by the little low light sensitivity that we had, these little IntelliTech lights, the 2 light panels, and they were like, you know, they were pretty cheap. I think it was like just these 2 light panels, and we kept them at literally at 1% and 2%, and that was it. Like one of them was so light, I had one taped to the ceiling right here, and the other one, you'll notice I don't have any blinds open in my recent short because I had the other one hanging by the blinds, and I just had it kind of bent so I could have one part of it beam on the screen and the other part hit the bed. And I was like, this is great. And I put some party gels on them to really push the color to where I want it to be, because I knew it never is good with these digital cameras when you push in the colors with what you want it to be. I like to shoot with the color I want it on set. And I pretty much did that, and it looked great. And I was like, perfect. If we only have to light with 1% of this is great. And
battery will last forever.
well, that's the thing. I had everything plugged into the wall sockets. It was great, even the camera. And we could just film all night if we wanted to. But yeah, I was sitting there like, I love the idea of not letting gear take over my brain. It's very freeing because it's so easy to go and say, well, I wish this was the 6K pocket, or I wish this was the, I love the Alexa look, that's such a fantastic looking camera. And I'm like, oh, I only have this or that. And it's like, it can build up in your head. Just work with whatever you have. I know some people that are like, oh, I would shoot a short right now, but I don't have $10,000 to go ahead and give to my camera gear and lighting and stuff. And I'm like, you don't need that kind of budget. You can go ahead and make it work a lot simpler. You just gotta tame your vision down. It's not gonna make or break it. It's on the 65. You can go ahead and have it on whatever camera you want. Do you think? I look at like Kubrick with Shining, and I'm like, that thing was shot. It was mostly an 18mm lens the whole time, and it wasn't shot with a large format or any of this junk. It was just with what he wanted it to feel like, and the distortion with I think it was super speeds, but I look at that and I'm like, this is fantastic. I think it's easy to get overwhelmed with the gear. I think the big thing is just to like find what you can make work, and I love that pocket because it really made those practicals sing. Like, it really got to make it feel like, oh, those lamps are really lasting here. It was really fun.
Well, man, you make a bunch of points that I have to like keep.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, it's great. It's perfect. I love it. Yeah, the one thing I will give Blackmagic credit for, and this is something I do wish I've kind of gotten on my one contact at Canon's case about, is like Blackmagic is updating their cameras all the damn time. Like, they keep adding new features. They keep like they're fucking great. B-Raw is great. But I think that going to the point of gear fetishism, I think it's easy to sit on YouTube all day and watch. Lord knows I'm on YouTube all day watching, people run down gear because it's fun to talk about. But I think there's a difference between sort of absentmindedly listening to it and just kind of knowing about new stuff and then staking your entire sort of livelihood on whether or not you got the right thing. And I think the main difference is no one has a story to tell. Everyone's more concerned about making pretty pictures. And then you go, well, what are you shooting? And they're like, well, I'm going to start a production company. It's like, what are you going to produce? And they're like, well, I haven't figured that out yet. It's like, well, then you don't need a fucking camera, man. Like, you need to worry about what you're going to shoot first, which is the same thing when I saw this big old argument on Twitter about how we can't just shoot it on a cell phone. That's bullshit. I'm like, you absolutely can. The problem is that your story sucks and you want the camera to make it look better. You want people to take you seriously, even though you don't deserve it.
No,
which sounds brutal,
true.
but it's like, that's the conversation we have to start having these days.
Oh, I 100% agree. I look at one movie that I look at that I'm like, God damn, this is beautiful. I was trying to remember what it was shot on, but I look at Arrival with Bradford Young, and he went ahead and was like, I'd rather amazing DP. He lights. It's very dark apparently on his sets, but he was like, I don't need to use really fancy glass. I can use some older lenses, and it was like, it gave so much character to it. I'm like, that's great. All these movies that everything we shoot gets so compressed, and it really, I wonder in the end, like, how much some of these movies, even like, some of them just look fantastic when you watch it on screen. Like Avengers looks fantastic, and that thing was shot in the Alexa. It wasn't shot 4K or whatever. It was just fantastic how it was. I think about just making it work with what you got, what you can budget for. Those are the DPs that are going to keep getting hired in the end, of the ones that don't hog the whole budget up. And they're like, hey, we can go ahead and make it work with this look. We don't have to shoot this way, Well,
it all comes down to production design. Like, if you don't have anything in front of the camera to shoot, the camera won't shoot any. You shoot on an Alexa, sure. But if you're in this room that I'm in, like, at least you got blue walls in there. These white walls look like trash, Oh,
if
you're trying to shoot some.
A
Did
fun
you
note.
paint them for the shoot?
Nope. So I had shot this, like you can see the white ceiling. That's what the whole room looked like, and so you can tell that's that. Okay, so one big hint towards for anybody who lives in like LA or cheap apartments, like everything's white walls. Like it's always white walls. When you can always tell you're in some apartment, you know, you're filming someone's girlfriend, the horror short. I'm like, okay, yeah. I get so annoyed by just seeing those white walls, and so I was like, ah. And with the short, I really colored. That's why I was putting party gels and really pushing the colors so much so that the gold really stood out from the lamp, and it was so easy. That's why it was everything's at 1%, because it'll blow out the whole room. The white walls capture all that light, and like I had everything snooted down. Like I had a desk lamp that was the moonlight that my roommate made, and we just had like a big old snoot on it just to make a moonlight glow from it. But nothing, if you bounce light anywhere, it just covers the walls. And so like when I was coloring it, it was a big pain in the butt. I was pretty much constantly trying to bring down the walls. And I look at it now and I'm like, I remember I had just finished it and it was sometime in September. And I was like, I'm sick of looking at these white walls. And I just painted, I just painted the whole thing out. I was like, I have to do this. But yeah, I'm so glad I did. It really does kind of do a nice job, especially like separation of skin tone versus the walls. I'm all about it. But
well, going back to the idea of, you know, you were saying your color, and I'll actually prompt you to talk about the short here in a second.
Oh, sure.
But being a DP, like, you know, sort of touching on the gear thing, like back in the day, you just had one or two film stocks, maybe up to 5 film stocks that you could pick from, but generally you picked one, slapped it in the camera that did your job, you know, that worked for your crew, and you went, right? The rest of it was costuming, production design, shot selection, lighting. But now, you know, back then the job of a DP was kind of mystical. Mm-hmm. Oh no, trust me, you know, it's going to look great, you know. And today it's not. Everyone knows how the camera works pretty much. Everyone can look at the monitor and go, no. You were talking about having colored this project yourself. What are some of the additional skills that you think DPs need to have today? Because in my opinion, you need to also be a colorist, an editor, and have production design pretty, not nailed, obviously, because that's a huge department, but just like a good way of directing, like where practical lights will go, for instance, what stuff you need in the background, you know, to sort of, for lack of a better term, color correct on set, you know? Yeah.
I think every DP should know color correction, just because, you know, in the end, you can't be the person on set that's like, oh, I remember a lot of music videos where some DP had watched them go ahead and say, oh, you can get rid of that in post. Mm-hmm. And you couldn't. You know, I remember going like in my head, like, I don't think you can. And I remember, you know, for a while after I was a DP, everyone said, oh, Julian, just be a professional DP and that's what you can do. And I'm like, I want to be a director. And I ended up actually going into different fields, into visual effects at Pixelmon for a bit, just so I could learn just a little bit more. Eventually I came back to directing, and now I'm directing a feature. But I look at the best things, at least as a director, what I tell people is work every job on set. But even as I tell actors to do this, I tell DPs to do this, direct your own short film, you know, learn how to edit on it, you know, do the visual effects you need to do, just direct something small, work with an actor, and you can see that job. You can understand that job, and that makes you way stronger when you go to DP again. And you're like, oh, if you know, directors want to know this, this, and this. How can I go ahead and be the best at that? Because, yeah, when I was a director and I went to DP for a bit, I was loved because I would instantly say, you know, this is good, but let's talk about where the shot's going to cut to next. You know, what's the shot? What's going to be the transition to this? And you're thinking in an editor's mindset, and that's going to make the director feel way, way, way more safer with you. You're constantly thinking, okay, well, yes, this would be a really cool shot, but will it cut to our close-up afterwards? Maybe not. You know, I think there's even I've had arguments where I have not arguments but more discussions, but it's all like, oh well, yes, this is a great way to light it, but we're going to be missing out on lighting the rest of the cast here. We might need something to flood out the back here. And it's always important to just know what a director's thinking about and be the step ahead as a DP. And I think that's super important. That, and also just, you know, there's something great about knowing how to light and work quickly with what you have. Like, I remember there was a big ad we're doing. It was a pimple ad, and so we had to have these high schoolers. Literally, I got a whole high school lit and stuff, and it was fantastic. But to save cost, I was like, I had the whole day planned on the sun, and basically had mirror boards up high, shooting light through all the windows, and I was calculating the whole thing out like that. And then we got done early, which I was like, I felt so proud of myself. And then the director turns to me and said, hey, can we go ahead? We want to go and shoot back in this hallway here because we got done early. I'd love to grab this one little line. And I'm looking in the hallway. It's just darkness. There's no area to capture light anymore to bounce in. I'm like, oh no, what do I do? And I went ahead and I was talking to my gaffer, and we were like, there's always something great about just experimenting with something on the fly. There's always a solution. I always tell people there's always a solution. And it ended up being moving all the mirror boards. So it literally, the sun was setting, and it literally went through the doorway. It had another mirror, like the mummy, and it bounced on that mirror down the hallway, through a sheet of muzz, and then to another mirror board, and it bounced through this other thing, I think, and it hit him. And I was like, okay, we have like 10 minutes. We have to get it now. It's just ridiculous. It was so funny. We just had it was just the most ridiculous thing, but
I saw that done on a Nike commercial that I PA'd on.
That's amazing. It's so much fun. It's like, it's seen those, it's thinking outside the box, and looking out for the director is the most important thing too. I like to think in a director's shoes all the time when I'm on set. And I think, yeah, even I try to give respect to the PD as well, because, you know, when you're dealing with that whole side, they're like, oh, they feel like they're kind of being stepped on all the time. The DPs, I remember just watching them treat like the props like just garbage. They just be like, you know, move that side out of the way, we're putting this up. And it's like, you know, you talk with them. I remember I would just talk to them to have another wall built just so I could bounce light off this wall or through the windows from it, just to add some more to the set. And you have a real discussion about what you both are looking for, so you're both on the same page. It's also a big thing with DPs that don't respect actors, and I'm like, oh, they should just, I don't know, DPs just need to go ahead, and it feels like a lot of times the you know, all the memes are made about the DPs that just kind of treat themselves like God on set. And I think the biggest thing you can do is just respect that the director has a vision and you're there to help it. You know, that, yeah, obviously we came from a place where we would shoot on film and no one knew what the hell was going to be coming out. Like the PD would come up to you like, is this safe? Is this going to be in? You know, like they'd ask you that. And you're like, oh, yes, you're good. And you feel good about that. But then all of a sudden now it's on a big old 17-inch monitor and everyone's like, oh yeah, they push themselves in there and like, no, this looks good. This way. Okay. Yeah. And you lose a little bit of that magic. I think one thing that I found is I've loved just being my own operator and being like, I love actually like moving without a monitor sometimes and just being like, okay, yeah, we're good. You know, I know this framing. I've used this lens before a bunch of times. I know what's in the frame. But it also kind of makes, I don't know, I know that when you have Video Village up, it slows you down. I like that Wally Pfister and Nolan didn't have Video Village for Inception for most of it, I guess. And I'm like, that speeds things up so much because you're just constantly moving, you know, you're constantly setting up and just like, okay, let's go. You know, I think when Video Village goes up, everyone sits and looks at it, drinks their coffee, and it turns it into something else. You know, I feel like that's great for commercials, but when you want to move quick on a narrative feature or something, you gotta move quick. It's not about sitting there and admiring some monitor for a while and then deciding on it. It's about moving fast and trusting your DP on it.
Yeah,
You know,
Eric Oscar winner Eric Messerschmidt was saying that DPs get probably too much credit for how a film looks and not enough credit for how it's told. And I think that's something that people should focus on. Like, your job is more so now than ever shot selection and mood, and like you were saying, carrying a director's vision forward, not so much making pretty pictures and stunning everyone at Video Village with how cool your flare is or whatever, whatever the hell you're stoked on that day.
Yeah, I think in the end it's just, I like with, for example, with writers, I love a good writer who goes ahead and calls me boss when I'm working on something. And I'm like, okay, cool. I know that my vision and whatever I'm going to say is definitely like their job, but they're going to go ahead and might have like, what about taking the scene this way? And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Let's try that out. But it's not like they're the cool guys and they're taking the control. You know, it's having a respect for the director and their mood. And on top of that, the other thing that DPs, I have to give a lot of respect to them for dealing with is a lot of client they have to deal with, a lot of those, like shooting for Toyota when they're like, oh, we need to capture this angle. And then, I remember shooting something where it's like, you have like in 1 year, like Toyota is saying one way, and then, Gina Rodriguez, like her whole, her agents are saying, oh, this isn't looking good on her. Can you go ahead and change it? And you're like, okay, how do I make you both happy here? And it's funny how you kind of run into those problems, but I think it's a really important thing to have is a good way of talking to clients, talking to these people, making them feel reassured, saying, instead of being like, oh, no, I'm the DP now. I've worked my way up to here and this is how it's going to be. And I think there's a way to talk to others and just say, hey, I'm hearing you, I'm listening. I think this shot, it's going to go really quickly. We're just going to capture this angle. We're going to have the sunlight's beaming through this window. We're not going to even see, we're going to barely see her here. Or, oh, the camera's doing a whole pivot during this movement here. We can just start here and then do this. There's a way to discuss it in a fun way.
Yeah, I think managing, if you're the type of DP who's going, for anyone listening, if you're the type of DP that is going to work with clients, you're shooting commercials or whatever, best advice I could ever give is like, learn to make them feel like they directed the whole thing. That every idea they had was heard and you did all of it and they're the fucking master of the set, because that's how you're going to get hired again. But to your point, like, ask why they want the shot, and then see if you can have a conversation and deliver the quote unquote correct answer to their why, because they might just be thinking, oh, I want it here because I want to see their face. And you're like, no, see, if we can do that, but if we do it this way, it'll yada yada yada. I don't know what the fucking project is for anyone, but
well, I think there's something great about when you're working your way up, whether it's the client or your executive producer, whoever it is, there's going to be there's always the term, the note behind the note. What is that? And what are they really after when they ask a question that might sound just ridiculous? And sometimes you have a director that doesn't know anything about cameras, and you're like, oh, well, what are they really after here? What are they asking when the scene feels sad? And you're like, what do you mean it feels sad? Just tell me what you want. And you're like, I don't know, there's something great when you sit there and like, oh, I get what you're saying. The lighting's looking like this on their face and their eyes are being covered a certain way. It can feel sad now. And so you can figure it out. And I love talking emotions now, where I start saying like, I think what we do want to bring in is a little bit of hope coming from this doorway. How can we get that? And I love to go ahead and talk to DPs now, almost how I speak to actors. But even though I might say, oh, yeah, I think like this particular, like a certain light coming outside from here, a sky panel at this setting will be great. Instead of saying like a particular item or whatever, I love to speak, even to my gaffers when I used to do this, I would just speak in the emotions. I'd say, oh yeah, I think this would work here. Maybe speak about like kind of what, like if you want something flagged off or something, but it's always speaking in the general term of what the director's after too, what's the emotional side of the scene. I think that's really important.
Yeah. So touching on it a couple times, but you just had this short Don't Peek. Well, first of all, for people who haven't heard it or seen it or anything, tell the folks about Don't Peek.
Don't Peek was a short that we made for no budget in my bedroom right here. And it was basically a short about a young woman playing Animal Crossing and comes across this creepy looking character that wants to be let out. And it's a fun little short where it really kind of played on the feelings I think we all had when we were sitting during lockdown, when we were sitting there just alone in the bed at night, just staying up way too late than we should be. And we come across something that feels off. And, the beginning of it, I was kind of it's really funny, actually. Shooting the thing was hysterical because it was really just, my goal was to make something that was with what we had in the apartment. And so the idea was like, oh, well, everyone has an Animal Crossing game. A lot of people are doing this now. So I think it would be fun to highlight that. And, it was really kind of funny because I look at it like, oh yeah, well, we have, we don't have a monster to put it out here. We don't have, and it was kind of just having fun with it. Like there's a bit more wonder to the beginning of this short. There's a lot more of like, oh, she closed the drawer in the game and her drawer closes, pulling off these little effects that we knew we could pull off in camera was fun. But yeah, oh my gosh, it was really just working with what we had. Like, since I didn't have a full monster, we had my roommate, Alex, who, he produces all the other horror shorts that I made where he's wearing a mask with 2 gloves and in his underwear. It doesn't look scary at all, but he's out of focus a few times and creepy there. One thing we did to pull off the scare is I had him hide under a blanket, and it's this creepy kind of, you see his weird shape under the blanket. And it's like just stuff that I realized like, oh, we could pull this off, we could pull off this stuff and not make it this huge, insane thing where you need a bunch of visual effects to pull it off. It was really just working with what we had. And I think that's what was really fun. And, thank God for that little black magic low light sensor, because we tried using a little light panel or something on the Switch to hit her face, but it looked ridiculous. And it was like the spotlight hitting her. And, we were able to brighten up the Switch and shoot this 1250 ISO, which is its base.
1250 or 12,500? 1250.
1250, yeah.
Okay, so you didn't have to go too high.
No. It was great. It was just the base ISO when you switch it to low light mode or whatever. And yeah, it was just, she's literally lit by the Switch. And I think that gives just even more authenticity, having those little elements was just great. And the short ended up blowing up online. I didn't even submit it to South by. Katie, my girlfriend and actor of this short, she actually submitted it. And the only film festival we entered in was South by, and ended up getting in. It was crazy. And then Basilivs came aboard and actually optioned it, and now I'll be directing the feature version of it very soon. And so right now we're doing a bunch of prep for it. Yeah, and I think it's important to always experiment and make stuff happen. Sadly, when I was a DP, no one trusted me with my ideas. No one ever would say, oh, well, he's the DP. But I really wanted to direct. I really wanted to try these ideas out. And it took a long time for me to finally get that strength to say something. And I did it with a short film called The Nurse. It was the first horror short. And that one I did for a contest, and it was done within a few days. It was treated like a BuzzFeed video where we basically shot it in the span of a few hours. And I was working during that time at the visual effects house. And so it was literally edited that night, colored the next night, and sound music done the next night. And then it was out, and it was wild. But it was so much fun. I ended up winning this contest, and New Line optioned that. And I was like, that's so cool. And then we made another one called Whisper, where it was about a Amazon Echo that could pick up on a voice that our main character couldn't hear. And so she's hearing this echo saying this stuff. And it's super fun. It's 2 minutes long. And it was literally shot in the span of like 5 or 6 hours. And it was literally uploaded in a week. And these shorts were really thrown together really quickly. But that one, I remember I was so hesitant to release it. And I was like, what if it's not good? What's not good? It can be kind of wacky. And I was almost hesitant to release it because I didn't think it looked great either. I thought it was kind of choppy. I didn't get enough time to color it nicely. But it ended up, I didn't think any filmmakers would have liked it. But then sure enough, a year later, Steven Spielberg loved it and optioned it at Amblin. And I was like, oh my gosh, like we're making this movie at Amblin. That's crazy. And so you just never know how it's going to go down. The other one was They Hear It, and that was shot, I think, with like 3 different cameras. But that was actually kind of funny. They Hear It was basically the one I made right after Whisper. It was I think 2 months after making Whisper. I had this idea for this creepy Twilight Zone kind of story where, these kids can hear the sound from the woods, but the adults can't. And after each night, these kids end up going missing to hear the sound. And so it's a fun, creepy story. And the short was kind of the opening scene from it. And this short hasn't been released yet, but I remember my DP on that one actually quit mid-shoot. He got sick, had to leave. And so sick. He got a little sick. And so because we were shooting on like this mountain over here, Fraser Park, and I was like, okay, well, I think most directors would panic. Thankfully, as a director DP, I was just like, well, whatever, we'll just go through it and we'll just do it anyway. And so I was kind of DPing the rest of it. And so which was funny was you get thrown in these situations and it never works out the way you want it to. I think it's important to always have that DP side of your head that you're just going to keep rolling with the punches. Our Dana Valley doesn't have the lowboy combo stands. We're in the woods. What are we going to do? And it's like, we got to throw it on some apple boxes and some sandbags, level it out each time, but we'll figure it out. And it's constantly thinking like that. There's always an answer to it. And that short ended up being optioned at Legendary, and with David Mitchell, who wrote It Follows, came aboard to write that script. And it's like these shorts, they all, find their way out there if you know how to pitch them and stuff. But I think the big thing is making something that's personal to you and you get to try out your own style and stuff like that. I think what's fun about doing something like Don't Peek, for example, is, there's no DP here. I'm just going to DP it because I can let myself loose. I'm not worried about some big head honcho there. I was just kind of like, it's on me if it looks bad. Right. And so it got me to experiment a little bit more with the color than I'm used to. I usually kept it really toned down, because it's something scary. But for this one, I was like, let's give it more color. Let's have some fun with it. And it was a lot of fun to kind of push it in that way. I think this is something different. And I think it's really nice for DPs to direct, just because you kind of put yourself in those situations where you're like, I think I want to try something out that no director would let me do. I think letting that out and experimenting with that is so helpful. Even if you don't end up directing in your career, I think it's important just to let loose and try that out. And I'm so glad I did, because I don't know, I think I really found myself as a director there, because I finally took myself seriously and took my thoughts seriously, and that really became a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying, what we were saying earlier about no one has a story to tell. Like, I think it is important. Like, if you think you have an idea, commit to it, put it out there, because you don't know, maybe it is bad. Fuck it. Like, ideas are bad, but you should have more than one, or maybe you get 3 shorts optioned at various production houses.
Yeah, it's funny how you just don't know where it's going to end up going. And I think it's important to not let that little voice in your head to stop you. There's a bunch of times where you can get overwhelmed and you get freaked out. And I think, I literally thought Whisper was a piece of crap, because it didn't scare me, but it scared other people apparently. But I was like, is it really that scary? And you just never know where it can end up going. I think, it's just important to try out even ideas, just whatever it is. Like, if as a DP, it's important just to honestly just know that your ideas are good. It's important to know that you have good thoughts. I think it's important to be in that situation where you're like, oh, I've experimented with this a bit on my own and just shot some stuff. And this was fun to just dive into that. I feel like I can trust myself more. I think there's times where we get very overwhelmed on shoots. Like there were times where I'd shot a really, really big ad and they wanted to, it was a big car ad. I'm not going to mention which one it was, but they moved, they wanted to, instead of a big psych reveal thing, they wanted to actually have it in a whole other location, but we had pre-lit the place for 2 days, you know, had it done right. And it was really like freaking me out because I get a call from the director the night before the shoot. And I'm like, oh my God, what we're moving the camera somewhere else. He's like, yeah. And I'm like, and it's like freaked me out. We're on the day and everyone's asking questions to me. And I'm like, and I remember I needed to like take a moment. And I remember there was a moment that Deacon said where he put his eye on the viewfinder and closed both his eyes. And no one bugs you because you're on the viewfinder, but he just like sat in his own mind for a second and with his thoughts. And I think that's important to do, you know, when you feel, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and just know that you can handle it. You know, it's just, yeah.
Another big one that helped me a lot was, I couldn't attribute the quote, but it's basically confidence comes after you know, it's, what's it called when you do something in the face of danger? It's not confidence. It's just willpower. You have to do the thing first. And then when you've learned that you'll live through it, that's when you have confidence to do the next thing. I think a lot of people get caught up in, oh, but how do I know if my idea is good? It's like, you don't, but you do it and then it fails or it succeeds, whatever. But then you know that you survived. You've learned some things. You do it again and again and again and again. And now you have a career.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us, you know, we might have some filmmaker that we really admire and think that they have all the answers, but they can be just as scared as we are. You know, it just depends on what it is. But yeah, I mean, I think it's always important to have that sense of danger, that sense of fear. That's like, oh, I'm freaked out about this. I get more, I don't know, I get more excited about those projects than anything. Where I'm like, I don't know how I'd handle this scene or handle that shot. And it's getting in my head and making me think, oh, I wonder if I could try something else out, something that's unsafe, try out a scene in a different way. I think that's way more exciting to me than something that's like, oh, okay, I feel safe with this. You know, I always want to try something out that's different, that makes me feel like I'm in uncomfortable waters. You know,
comfort will
I think
kill
that's
you.
what's more exciting. Yes.
You know, you don't get a 6-pack from laying down.
Exactly. And I think it's fun. Like, I mean, of course, like I think it's just important to try out things that you really wouldn't. Like even the first horror short, I was like exhausted. I was going through like a bit of a breakup at that point. And I was like, oh, I was sleeping on my friend's couch and I was like, you know, I just want to relax. I don't want to do this right now. I feel like garbage. And I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I ended up doing this thing because, who knew where it would take me, you know? And it took a lot of my money, but it was like, hey, I'll do it, you know, make it happen. I think it's important to go ahead and take those risks. It's now like, you know, I'm represented CAA because of one of those shorts, and it's wild to see how that all happens. It's important to just take those risks and try out new things. Try out a short that's like, it does all these visual effects, or try one that doesn't have any visual effects, but you have to give it this look that's, you know, something extraordinary off of nothing. And I think it's fantastic.
Can you hear that?
Hold the plane.
No, it's the fucking leaf blower. All right, noise reduction. It's coming in. So to wrap it up, thanks so much for spending this time with me. I ask everyone the same 2 questions to end. One, well, I won't say the second one. I've learned. First one, what is the not the one thing, but what's like one thing that pops up in your mind that you think has helped you along your career? It can be a physical item, it can be a change of lifestyle, a piece of advice you got, like one thing that just bounces off your head all the time?
I find this works with everything in terms of like writing or even, editing something or even shooting something. I think we are hesitant about something, whatever that is in our career. It can be anything. And I always say like for example, when I was hesitant to put out the Open Peak, that short, I was like, is it that scary? I don't know. And I think it's important to not let something die on a hard drive. I think it's important as an artist to always cut the umbilical cord, like it's scary and you're nervous about this thing, but you just got to do it. And I think that can be attributed to anything, but I think there's always a project sitting on a hard drive or sitting in your head and you're like, oh, I'm right. I want to write it, but I want to send out the script, but I'm scared. There's always that little bit of hesitation. I think it's always important to just let it free. Let that thing out there. I think that's very important. I think the other thing I'd probably say is just what we were talking about earlier about tools. Don't let the tools and all those things get in your head, make it work with what you got. I think is such a fun constraint because it forces you to like sit down, and there's always somebody that has a camera nearby. There's always somebody that you can help out with, and they can just come aboard and just, do whatever. And you can borrow some all right camera to shoot something with. I think there's always a nice way of just having fun with it. I will say the other thing I don't think we covered was doing things that we don't feel like a genre we don't feel comfortable in. I'd never done horror up until this point in 2017 or 2016. 2017 is when I did my first horror short, and I was always doing comedies and dramas. I didn't think I could handle it, and I was like, oh. I'm a comedy drama guy. And when I did my first horror thing, everyone was like, what's wrong with you? I thought you were better than that. And I think that mindset is very easy to have. I think it's changed in the recent times. Like I have a lot of friends that now do horror things, but I think it's easy to be hesitant to try something new. To like, oh, I don't feel like I can cover a documentary style approach, or some people that shoot docu style, shooting something very cinematic and different, very bolted or whatnot. I think it's very different to jump back and forth, and that can even be something you're hesitant to do. And I think it's just important to try it out, try out something that gets you nervous. I think it's really, really important to just try something out, because sometimes you just kind of like, what am I even doing here? It's always important to just, you never know if that's the genre that might click with you.
Totally. Second question, just what do you want to promote? What do you want the people to, where can they see your stuff? Where can they find you? What, the floor is yours.
The floor is mine. Oh my gosh. Well, I guess the biggest place right now is my YouTube channel. It's Julian Terry, or type in Don't Peek, it should pop up. The big thing I'm going to be dropping there soon is a huge making of video for the short, in terms of showing all the little practical effects we put into it, in terms of also like breaking down. I do break down a bit of like how we put this thing together gear-wise with what little we had, and how we were able to push that to its limit. A little bit about the editing and the color and stuff that got taken out, some of the stuff you might not have noticed. And I think it's really important to just show that we can all put this stuff together for no budget, and we can end up, you never know if it can end up giving you a jump start in your career. I think It's very important to kind of inspire others. The craziest thing about these days are you can, I went to talk to a high school about a year ago. I think it was a little over a year ago before the pandemic hit. But what was crazy about it was all of these kids were knowledgeable using DSLRs. I was sitting there like, wow, what? I would have freaked out if I was in high school and I could use a DSLR. I don't know. It's crazy to look at that now and I think a lot of us get so used to having these cameras around, and we kind of think, oh, like I have my old T2i right here, like this
Classic.
thing is ancient, but I bet you I could have shot Don't Peek the same way. It might have taken a little more light, but you can pull off the stuff. It's just, in the end, you can color it up and make it look really dang good with color correction. I think the big thing is knowing that we all have the tools to do it. I think it's just having the guts to go ahead and make it yourself.
Resolve is free.
Shot. Yes, Resolve is free. I think that's the thing is, DaVinci, they get a lot of crap for their cameras sometimes. I don't know why. You know, I think they had a rough start, but I think it's incredible to see what they're giving out. They're giving out free editing. They're giving out free color. It's incredible. And I think it's just fantastic. You can look at YouTube and just gain all this knowledge. And it's an incredible time to be a filmmaker. I think it's just about making something that's just fun and just different enough to get people's attention. You never know where that can take you.
Totally. Well, again, thanks so much for spending the hour and some change with me. I really appreciate it. And when those features start getting made, we'll or next time you have a project, just let me know and we'll have you back on and talk about it.
Fantastic, man. I'm super excited. Let's get going.
For sure.
All right.
Well, take care and have a nice day.
Catch you later. Peace.
Yep. Bye-bye. Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by ProVideo Coalition. Our theme song is written and performed by Mark Pelly, and the F&R Mattbox logo was designed by Nate Truax of Truax Branding Company. You can read or watch the podcast you've just heard by going to provideocoalition.com or youtube.com/owlbot, respectively. And as always, thanks for listening.